Biden declines, America declines. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Joe Biden is in France tonight for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and whenever he's overseas, we as Americans collectively, let's admit it, kind of hold our breath, hoping that when he gives his speech on democracy, he doesn't embarrass us by speaking like he does back home.
He had tied that fall. He decided to, look, I shouldn't get into this problem. Never forget, America is the strongest when we lead, not only by our example of our power, but by the power of our example. You can clap for that.
But we can't want, any of us, the visual of Macron having to guide Biden off the stage, which so many here have had to do. That tape on the ground like we had during COVID. Well, we were there 5 years ago for the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landing, and I interviewed President Trump after his whirlwind visit to London and before he would speak in Normandy, where his speech hit all the right notes.
They battled not for control and domination, but for liberty, democracy, and self-rule. They were sustained by the confidence that America can do anything, because we are a noble nation with a virtuous people praying to a righteous God.
The man was then and is now a juggernaut. Even if you don't agree with Trump's policies, you cannot deny, if you're honest, that even 5 years later, he has the energy of a man far younger. When president, Trump regularly had meetings well into the night and on the weekends, and in stark contrast to Biden's schedule, of course, where he's well known for calling it a day before midday.
White House officials told us not to expect to see him the rest of the day.
The White House calling an early morning lid for the president.
The White House has just called a lid, which means we will not see him later today.
Yet through it all, including the long media blackouts, the press remained in complicit silence, refusing to ask the obvious questions, such as, is Joe Biden really making important decisions? And if he's not, who is? For a while now, polls have shown that Americans are picking up on Biden's mental and physical unraveling. And an online poll just today or yesterday by the National Desk that currently has over 15,000 votes shows that nearly 80% of Americans say they're very concerned about Biden's mental fitness. My goodness, who are these, 21% or so? They're either cognitively impaired themselves or dishonest leftists, or do they simply not watch Biden at all?
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate.
Well, he routinely just can't remember the names of even our closest allies. Well, slowly, a few journalists felt compelled to do their jobs and press the issue.
The president, in public remarks, mixed up the leaders of France, Germany, and he referred to Egypt as Mexico. Does the president have any memory problems?
He does not.
And today, the Wall Street Journal finally published the piece we've all been waiting for, answering, what's Biden like behind closed doors? Is he truly engaged in key decision-making? And here's what they said. When President Biden met with congressional leaders in the West Wing in January to negotiate Ukraine funding, he spoke so softly at times that some participants struggled to hear him, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points. He paused for extended periods and sometimes closed his eyes for so long that some in the room wondered whether he had tuned out. Now, repeatedly, Biden seems to forget also his own administration's policies, or I don't know, maybe he never even knew them in the first place. In a February one-on-one chat in the Oval Office with House Speaker Mike Johnson, the president said a recent policy change by his administration that jeopardizes some big energy projects was just a study. Well, it was a policy. Johnson worried that the president's memory had slipped about the details of his own policy. And in the just-released Time interview, the president completely bollocksed up so many things that they did a rare fact check after the interview, including Biden's claim that he set up the Quad himself, or it's the quadrilateral security dialogue, but it was actually begun back in 2004 at the end of the Bush administration and then formalized in 2007 by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Well, look, given the growing doubt about Biden's abilities, the White House is scrambling to do damage control. The White House kept close tabs, it turns out, on some of the Wall Street Journal's interviews with Democratic lawmakers. After the offices of several Democrats shared with the White House either a recording of an interview or details about what was asked, some of those lawmakers spoke to the Journal a second time and once again emphasized Biden's strengths. They just, said that I should give you a call back, said Gregory Meeks, New York Democrat, referring to the White House. Oh, I bet. And of course, right on cue, the democracy defenders over at MSNBC, they moved in today to try to discredit a piece where 45 Republicans and Democrats were interviewed, and the White House was given ample opportunity to respond.
This does have the feeling of Trump acolytes laundering their attacks through a reputable, prestigious news organization in the Wall Street Journal.
I've spent time with Biden and Trump privately. If you want to talk about international affairs, if you want to talk about how to get bipartisan legislation, Joe Biden is light years ahead of all of them.
He literally goes around the globe on the chart in the Situation Room and points out the weaknesses and the strengths of the United States relationships with each and every country that he's talking about with no notes. With no notes.
Wait, he said Biden with no notes? Okay. There's no notes. My name is Joe Biden. Now, if you call yourself a political analyst and are still blocking and tackling for Biden, you should either join his campaign staff, make it official, or step down. Now, it's true that Biden's obviously markedly worse, though, than he was back in 2020.
This is part of the mandate given to us from the American people. They want us to cooperate in their interest. I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, etc.
But to be perfectly candid here, he wasn't any great shakes back in 2020 either, as the Angle chronicled at the time.
It's unclear whether Biden knew where he actually was. And these performances of Biden, they don't exactly give voters confidence that he's ready to lead or can lead any longer.
But to use Biden's favorite crutch word, look, we don't have to prove that he's in severe cognitive decline. There's no question about that. It's beyond dispute. The burden is on them to show us that Biden is actually capable of handling himself in a wide-ranging, on-camera, serious interview shown live without edits. The most serious issue here is that it is obvious that key decisions regarding our nation's present and our future are being made by unelected officials. Probably a combination of Tony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, perhaps in coordination with Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. But none of these people are president, but they might as well be. The White House may be fooling some voters and have some press people snookered here, but we know that he's not fooling President Xi of China or Putin of Russia, or any world leader for that matter. And the cabinet knows how bad it is, as we see from the Journal piece top congressional leaders do too. Think of it this way. Would any Fortune 500 board of directors go to their shareholders and be able to credibly argue that Joe Biden right now is capable of being their CEO? Of course not. But we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden is capable of leading the country or should be leading the country? Now, if by some horrible turn he actually gets reelected, here's my prediction. We're going to gradually see less and less of Joe Biden in public until he fades away completely. But unfortunately for the rest of us, America would fade away at the same time. And that's The Angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.